This is the last set of notes for Unit 2. It will cover modules 29 and 21 and 59 in your book. And it's going to cover a hodgepodge of topics that don't really make sense anywhere else. We are going to talk about ecosystem services, island biogeography, and ecological succession. So, to start with ecological succession, that describes the replacement of groups or species over time. And there are two types: primary succession and secondary succession. The key with primary succession is that it starts with no soil. So, we have exposed rocks, and then lichens and mosses arrive to the area by wind or by, some animal passing by, and those will grow on the rocks and start to break it down so that the soil becomes fertile enough for other organisms, and so on until we get to, big, awesome trees. With secondary succession, we already have soil and there is some sort of disturbance that, wipes out a big area of land. And so the same kind of process has to go, it has to go through the same type of process, but we do already have viable soil with secondary succession. It can occur with aquatic ecosystems as well, as you can see in this picture, but our focus is mostly about primary and secondary, not aquatic. To talk about some things we looked at last week with species richness, it is influenced by a lot of different factors like latitude, time, habitat size, and its distance from other communities. What we notice with latitude is that the number of species declines as you move away from the equator. So our areas around the equator have, the highest species richness, and then we're going to decline as we move towards the poles. It's also important for time because, of course, the longer a community has been around, the more species it will have. Larger habitats will typically have more species, and how close it is to other communities can have an impact too. So, if an area is close to another community, it will likely have more species than ones that are far away from other communities. And that leads us to the theory of island biogeography, which demonstrates the importance of habitat size and distance in determining species richness. We are going to do an example of this in class, but the idea is that larger islands closer to the mainland will have more species than smaller islands and or ones that are farther away from the mainland. The downside is that we are experiencing global declines in the genetic diversity of wild species that could be caused by nature, like when the cheetahs went through a bottleneck event, can be caused by humans through hunting, habitat destruction, inbreeding, etc. And the problem is that decreases in genetic diversity leads to a decrease in species diversity. We are also experiencing global declines in the genetic diversity of domesticated species as well. Because of humans selectively breeding, we have a very small gene pool, which leaves little room for adaptations, which is going to be a huge problem, as we talked about last week, with, as our planet is warming and changing, a species either need to adapt or die. And with a small gene pool, the likelihood of adaptation is exceedingly low. What we know is that species diversity is declining around the world, and we look at that by looking at, what category they fall in. So threatened species have a high risk of extinction in the future. Near threatened species are likely to become threatened in the future, and our least concerned species are widespread and abundant. This graph shows threatened, near threatened, and least concern for birds, mammals, and amphibians. As we know, amphibians are good indicator species to how healthy an ecosystem is. And so for them to have a large number of threatened and near threatened species is not a great thing at all. Of course, this graph is a little out of date. I think it probably looks worse now. Next, we'll talk about our ecosystem services, which are the contributions of an ecosystem. There are 4 types: provisioning, regulating, supporting, and cultural. Provisioning services are goods produced by the ecosystem that humans can use directly, like lumber, crops, medicinal plants, and furs. Regulating services regulate environmental conditions like climate and erosion control. Supporting services include pollinating, nutrient cycling, and population control. And cultural services are the benefits to human. Like it's pretty, you like to go there, it's a spiritual place for you, whatever. And that is it. Enjoy your day.